If you thought you had seen everything Caitlin Clark was capable of, you were not paying close enough attention, because there are games, specific nights where everything she does elevates, and the players around her rise with her. And on those nights, the Indiana Fever becomes something that looks less like a basketball team and more like a force of nature that no defensive scheme can contain. Tonight we are talking about one of those nights, the night Caitlin Clark and Lexie Hull decided that the game belonged to them, and then proceeded to prove it in front of a crowd that will be talking about what they witnessed for a very long time. If you thought Steph Curry invented what a backcourt takeover looks like, wait until you see what these two did together. This was different, this was something new, and we are going to take you through every single moment of it right now. Today we are walking you through the complete breakdown of the Clark and Hull takeover, from the first quarter where the foundation was laid to the closing minutes where the game was put away with the kind of ruthless efficiency that only comes from two players who trust each other completely. We are covering the deep bombs, the transition attacks, the defensive breakdowns Hull exploited, and the passing sequences that made every analyst who watched the film afterward shake their head at how good this combination looked when it was operating at its peak. This is the game that showed everyone watching what the Fever can be when their best players are locked in at the same time. Get ready, because this one goes deep. Let's start at the beginning, because the beginning is where you understand how this night was different before the numbers started piling up. Clark came out in the first quarter doing something that she does not always do in the opening minutes of games. She was aggressive immediately. Not patient aggressive, not feeling out the defense and seeing what they would give. Immediately aggressive. The first time she caught the ball with any space, she was already in her shooting motion, and the defender had to make a split-second decision about how far out they were willing to chase. They were not ready for the answer. Clark pulled from 28 feet on the first real possession of the game, and when it dropped clean through the net, the entire building understood that tonight was going to be something different. Hull read that signal the way only a player who has been playing alongside someone understands it. When your teammate opens the game from 28 feet and makes it look routine, it tells you something specific about their confidence level and their read on what the defense is going to give them. Hull started attacking her matchup with that information built into every decision she made. She came off a screen in the corner and caught the pass on a dead sprint, had her feet set before the defender could recover, and knocked down the three that made the early deficit on the other side real and uncomfortable. That was the first 2 minutes. By the time the first quarter was 5 minutes old, the other team's coaching staff was already in a huddle trying to figure out which adjustment had any chance of working against what they were watching. The thing about guarding Caitlin Clark is that there is no position that is safe. Bring her off the ball and she will set you up for a pin down that gets her the catch and shoot from the corner. Leave her with any space beyond the arc and she will step into a three from a distance most players do not consider a real shot. Double team her and she has already seen the open player before the second defender committed. Clark operates the offense at a level where every defensive adjustment creates a new problem somewhere else on the floor. And when the player next to her is shooting the ball the way Hull shot it on this particular night, the math for the defense becomes completely impossible. You cannot guard them both. You cannot cover every action. Something is going to be open and Clark is going to find it with the kind of precision that only comes from a point guard who sees the game 3 passes ahead of everyone else. Hull finished the first half with 14 points on 5 of 8 shooting, and every single made basket felt like a direct product of what Clark was doing to the defense. Not because Hull cannot create for herself, she absolutely can, but because the way Clark manipulates defensive attention is so complete that her teammates often receive the ball in positions where they are already in rhythm and the shot is already uncontested before they have made any individual decision about whether to shoot it. Hull stepped into a mid-range pull-up off a drive and kick from Clark, and it was in and out of the net before the closing defender's hand got anywhere near her release. She caught a skip pass in the right corner on a broken play where Clark had drawn 2 defenders to her side of the floor and had 3 feet of daylight to set her feet. These were not lucky looks. These were the product of a system operating exactly the way it is designed to. The crowd had the energy of something building from very early in the game, and that energy is its own force multiplier when the home team is feeding it correctly. Every made 3 from Clark brought everyone out of their seats. Every Hull basket that came directly off a Clark assist set the arena into the kind of noise that changes the atmosphere of the game itself. Visiting teams feel that pressure. Defenders who are already struggling to keep up with the offensive actions on the court now have to process that noise and maintain their assignments and communicate their switches, all while the pace of the game keeps pushing forward at the speed Clark demands. The crowd was not just watching that night, the crowd was part of what was happening, and Clark and Hull were conducting it. There were moments when the crowd could not stay in their seats at all. Clark drove the left side of the lane, drew the help, and fired a skip pass to Hull in the dunker spot that arrived exactly as Hull was turning her shoulder toward the basket. The finish was already decided before Hull caught it. 2 points that felt like 10 because of the way the play developed, because of how completely the defense had been dismantled in real time, and because the crowd had been waiting for exactly that sequence since the third possession of the game. Those are the moments that do not show up fully in the box score. You can see the assist and the made basket, but you cannot see in the numbers how that single play broke the spirit of the defending team's bench and forced another timeout that accomplished nothing except giving Clark and Hull time to sit down and prepare for the next run. The second half is where things went to another level entirely. Clark came out of halftime with the kind of focus that looks like aggression from the outside, but is actually just complete clarity about what the game is and how it needs to be played. She pushed pace and transition before the defense was set. She probed the pick and roll coverage until she found the seam. She attacked the nail on the third pick and roll of every sequence because she had watched the first two and identified exactly where the defense was going to be late. And when she got to that spot, she was already looking for Hull coming off the strong side screen, already knowing where she would be, already loading the pass before Hull had finished her cut. The timing was not human basketball timing. It was something that only exists between two players who have put in the hours to understand each other at a level that does not require verbal communication. Hull's range on this night was the story within the story. She hit a 3 from the corner off a Clark dish that was already famous for being a difficult pass, a skip throw that covered 35 feet of court while Clark was falling away from the defense and still had the vision and the touch to drop it exactly into Hull's shooting pocket. Hull caught it, did not gather, did not pause, simply released the shot in one fluid motion that started at the moment of the catch. That sequence represents the best version of what this team is capable of producing, a play that required two elite decisions happening simultaneously. Clark deciding to throw a pass that most players would not attempt, and Hull deciding to shoot a ball she caught on a dead sprint with no separation time between the catch and the release. Both decisions were correct. Both executions were perfect. The crowd response shook the building. Stepping into the conversation about what the Fever can be at full strength, there were questions all year about whether the pieces around Clark were capable of matching her level on the nights that mattered most. There were questions about consistency, about whether the chemistry that looked promising in certain stretches of the regular season could be relied upon when the game was important enough to demand the best from everyone. Hull had answered some of those questions in stretches throughout the year, but this game was different because this was not a stretch. This was a complete performance from start to finish where nothing looked accidental and nothing looked like a lucky sequence that happened to come together. This was two players who had prepared for this game, had studied the opponent, and had arrived ready to execute at a level that justified every expectation the most optimistic Fever fan had ever allowed themselves to hold. There is a specific play that needs to live forever in the highlight archive of this team, and it happened at the 6-minute mark of the fourth quarter with Indiana up 7 and the game at its most contested point. Clark brought the ball up on a side pick and roll, came off the screen hard, got to the elbow, and found Hull cutting baseline from the weak side with a bounce pass that fit through a gap that most guards would not have seen, and fewer could have thrown through cleanly. The pass hit Hull in stride. Hull finished through contact. The crowd went absolutely silent for 1/2 second and then erupted in a way that told you exactly how significant that moment was to everyone in the building. The lead went to 10. The game was over even though the clock said there were still 6 minutes left. You could see it in the body language of every player on the other team's bench. They were done. Hull finished that game with 22 points, 7 rebounds, and 4 assists. Clark had 27 points and 11 assists. Those are the numbers on the surface. The numbers underneath the numbers are more interesting. Clark's 11 assists produced 62 points from her teammates, which means the Fever scored almost 90 points on the possession count that included either a Clark shot or a Clark assist. That is not a team running a good offense. That is a team operating at an efficiency level that almost no professional basketball team can sustain for 40 minutes. And it happened in a game that mattered, against a defense that was prepared and trying, in front of a crowd that demanded the best performance the team had available. Hull shot 6 of 10 from the field and 4 of 7 from 3, which tells you something specific about the quality of looks she was getting. Those are not contested shots with a hand in the face. Those are clean releases from rhythm positions, the kind of shooting percentages mismatches that only exist when the player generating the offense is forcing the defense to make impossible choices on every possession. Hull's contribution within that total was 22 points, but her role in creating the conditions for everyone else was just as important. When defenses have to account for Hull as a real shooting threat, it opens the middle for Clark's drives. When Hull attacks on the roll, it collapses the coverage that would otherwise be available to help on Clark's pull-ups. They are better together than either of them is individually, and this game made that impossible to argue against. The passing showcase from Clark on this night deserves its own breakdown separate from the scoring, because the assists are the part of her game that makes her genuinely different from any shooter-first guard who has ever played in this league. Every great shooter in basketball history creates attention. What they do with that attention separates the good ones from the historic ones. Clark does not just attract the double team, she reads it before it arrives, decides where the ball is going before the second defender has committed, and delivers the pass with a touch that accounts for where her teammate needs the ball to be to shoot it, not where it is convenient for her to throw it. The pass to Hull in the corner was not thrown to Hull's hands. It was thrown to Hull's shooting pocket. It was thrown to the spot that made the catch and the shot one continuous motion rather than two separate actions. That kind of pass requires a level of teammate awareness and spatial processing that most basketball players never develop, and Clark produces it at a rate that makes it look unremarkable until you watch it in slow motion and understand what you are actually seeing. Are you watching the best the Fever have ever looked? That is the question that follows every game like this one, and the reason it keeps getting asked is that each time Clark and the players around her reach a new collective ceiling, it is genuinely unclear where the ceiling above that one is. Hull is getting better, her off-ball movement is sharper, her catch and shoot timing is faster, her willingness to attack the basket off the drive and kick has expanded what defenses have to prepare for when she is on the court. The combination of two players who are each improving individually while also developing the shared chemistry that makes them more dangerous together than they are apart is exactly the kind of trajectory that great teams ride into championship conversations. The Indiana Fever are in that conversation now, and games like this one are the reason why. The record books are already filling up with what Clark has done in her time in the league. The assists records, the scoring milestones, the viewership numbers that no WNBA team had ever produced before she arrived. But the record that matters most on nights like this one is harder to quantify. It is the record of a player making everyone around her better in ways that show up in their statistics but originate in her presence on the floor. Hull had games before Clark, and she had good games. She had games after Clark arrived that were demonstrably better, more efficient, higher value, coming off more uncontested looks than her previous seasons had produced. The connection between those facts is not coincidence. It is the direct product of playing alongside someone whose impact on defensive attention frees up every player they share the court with to operate at a level closer to their maximum potential. That is what Clark does. That is what this game showed the basketball world one more time. If you felt that energy watching this breakdown and you want to be there every time Clark and Hull and this Fever team produce another night like this one, drop something in the comments and let us know which play hit you the hardest, because there were too many candidates to name just one. Show some love for what these two are building together, because this is not a peak. This is not the moment where you look back and say that was the best it ever got. This is the foundation. This is the team finding out what it is capable of and starting to reach for the version of itself that wins things. If you are not subscribed yet, fix that right now, because the next chapter of this story is coming and you want to be there when it does.